topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program, which has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. If we've not met before and you don't know me, I'm a workforce advisor, organizational psychologist, management consultant, logotherapist, speaker, and author. I am constantly researching, helping my clients elevate their leadership and culture. And my team and I at Gusto now help companies enliven and fortify their operations by building a dynamic, high-performance culture, inspirational leadership, and nurturing managers activated by meaning and purpose. And did you know that inspired employees and purpose-led companies outperform their satisfied peers by a factor of 2.25 to 1? In other words, inspiration and purpose are good for the bottom line. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at gusto-now.com or my personal site, elisecortez.com. On today's program, we have with us today Yadira Caro. She's an organizational psychology practitioner who has been working with teams of developers and engineers with military operations for over 15 years. She's the author of Hardcore Soft Skills, a guide to work with humans. We'll be talking about how and why learning what have been called soft skills makes such a difference in motivating and engaging teams, and dive into several of the core soft skills that she teaches. She joins today from Tampa, Florida. Yadi, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thank you so much, Elise. I'm very happy to be here on the show.
We just have to also say bienvenida, Working on Purpose, and bem-vindo, Working on Purpose, because you and I both speak Spanish and Portuguese. I know you spreche de Deutsch. I don't speak German, but I do speak a little French, a little Italian with enough wine.
Yes, exactly. We could all become more fluent that way.
Yes, it's amazing how much better I sound. At least I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to just start by sharing just the humble and beautiful way that you opened your book. You know, we oftentimes talk about the importance of teaching and learning what we need most to learn. And I just think it's just so beautiful. So let me just read this for our listeners and viewers, because it is the very opening of your book. You write, and I quote, you were talking with your soft skills are like sandpaper, my husband said to me one day as I was giving him feedback on a project he was working on. I was trying to tell him how he was focusing on the wrong priorities and that he needed to reassess. I think the exact words I used were, quote, "You are being lazy." It was well intended. I knew he could do more, but the tone of my voice and the words I chose reflected my frustration. His response? To reject entirely what I had said. You may have encountered similar challenges at work, which is, of course, why you wrote the book. But I just thought, gosh, can't we all relate to this? You know, this is so relatable, and it helps us understand you and connect with you right out of the gate. So beautiful, Yadi.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So let's talk, before we get into the book and really, you know, what's in it, why you wrote it. Let's just talk a little bit about your background and what drew you to research soft skills in the workplace and help companies to incorporate them. Why this? Why not, I don't know, strategy or something like that?
Yeah, so it's the fact that I have been working for now about over a decade, and 18 years that I've been working specifically in military organizations with teams of engineers, developers, and all the people with brilliant skills, and also in kind of rough environments, being the military as well. So I've been working a lot in the areas of focus on developing products and helping the teams become more productive, and realizing that you could have a team of very talented people, like all good at what they do, and there's still this gap of a lot of times, basically the projects don't work out or initiatives die on the vine. And I thought a lot about that and thinking that we we tend to focus a lot on the aspect of how to cultivate our technical skills. Like if we just become better at, this program or get this certification. And around the time of 2020, when COVID hit, and I was living in Germany at the time and working with the team on site, meaning in an office. So we had to quickly transition into working from our respective homes, but also we still had a deadline to commit to deliver a particular product. So realizing that aside from the skills that the brilliant team of engineers had, we also needed to be able to find the ability to work together effectively, to collaborate, to really communicate when we're not in an office. And I started exploring and kind of delve more into the term of soft skills, soft quote unquote, because it just sounds like I would think before that soft skills were along the lines of etiquette or about like things that were like how do you behave on a in a dinner setting, and realizing that what we call soft skills are all about critical skills, meaning that the for working with people, social skills, or managing effectively or communicating or negotiating. So all these skills that are not very considered technical, yet that we really need to develop in order to really succeed in teams. So that's how I started with the podcast at Hardcore Soft Skills back in 2020, and it evolved into learning from others more about skills, doing my studies in organizational psychology to learn more about that, and now kind of developing that framework based on the lessons that I have learned along the way.
Beautiful. And I appreciate that. You're reminding me as you were talking about the specific kinds of people that you've been helping. You're reminding me that a big chunk of the people that I've worked with over the years too have been engineers, IT people, and scientists. People that love and need to use their minds. And I think part of the reason I've been drawn to them is I do like working with people like that, and to help round out this capacity to, as you say, to better collaborate, to better relate to their team members, to better understand them, which of course allows them to better motivate them and increases their performance. All these things that are so important. And you say so also in your book that I laugh about this too, is I think that soft skills is probably an outdated phrase now. It's still being used, but it's outdated. More and more increasingly, you and I both know that these kind of skills are now called essential. In fact, in the work that we're doing at Gusto now, our tagline is doubling down on humanity in the age of AI, right? So it's really such a way to, one, distinguish our contribution as work as humans, but also to do it more effectively with and through technology.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right, because even now, because we are in a very evolving, technologically evolving environment, if we look at a report, for example, from the World Economic Forum, they recently had a report that specified that the skills for the future, we don't know what the jobs are going to look like 10 years from now. Possibly a lot of the roles that we have right now are going to be extinct or new roles will come in. But when it came to specific skill building, AI, of course, was one of them, but it wasn't necessarily like on the top five. The top five were or the top 10 were empathy, critical thinking, communication, working with others. So those are the skills that in the age of AI or the digitally changing environment, those are the skills that are humans. We need to become better at working on those critical skills.
100% agree, my dear. It's amazing. Both of us are working in a similar space. So, of course, I agree with that since that's a lot of the work that I do. Okay, so for those listeners and viewers that are listening to this, maybe by accident they stumbled on this, and they didn't intend to learn about soft skills. I think it would be useful to compare and contrast here. So, if you could describe a manager's results and effectiveness without these kinds of skills, what does that look like? How would we know that's who we're dealing with? Alongside somebody else who really does have those skills. So if you could kind of paint the picture of those two different managers without and with soft skills.
Absolutely. And it's a great way to frame it, like the either or side. Because, for example, with managers that may not be necessarily focusing too much on the soft skill side, they could be very process driven. They could be just going into a team and telling them like, this is the process, this is what you follow, without necessarily taking into consideration what are the specific skills for those team members that they need to develop, or what are those things that the teams really want to work with, the team members. So managers that doesn't focus on that is very process driven. While you will have, on the other hand, if a manager really focuses on those on the aspect of the people, meaning that understanding that as a manager, you have the people to do the work, and that you need to give them the support in order to be able to execute better, to provide a better product. That it is very important to do that first part of connecting, which is part of the framework that I discuss in the book. Very important as a manager to connect first with the team, understand what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses as well, in order to have that self-awareness as a manager, to know what are the areas that we as managers need help to improve. That's a very important factor. Another one will be that if a manager that doesn't focus on the soft skill side may consider themselves that they may have a lot of knowledge in a specific area, or that they have the solution for a particular problem, without necessarily understanding how to use the collective knowledge of the team to solve the problem, to help them, give them a framework to be able to collaborate effectively, to have good meetings that actually are good meetings that people want to attend, that are meetings that people come up with creative solutions. So you could have if a manager doesn't necessarily focus on those specific areas of how can I improve my meetings, how can I really get the best out of my team, then they will probably not have the same results. And also, a manager that may not necessarily be focusing on soft skills is also a person that may not be willing to learn from mistakes, or cultivate a culture of continuous learning, of mentorship. A manager that does have that awareness and have cultivate those skills, they are able to create an environment that is healthy, to have conflict within the team, that the team stops and reflects on what they're doing, and that also it's not just embracing failure necessarily, but that we can learn from it. So that's the main differences in between a manager that's process driven, skill set, focus on the job, but not taking into consideration how to really enrich cultivating the skills of the team and creating the space for the team to thrive, and they don't realize that they will have better results that way.
Very well articulated, and I think it helps our listeners and viewers start to recognize just how much room there is for all of us to grow.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily to become well-rounded per se, because I think that's a little bit of an outdated phrase, but to be able to have access and have cultivated the critical skills, both technically as well as the people side of the house. And so I think that was a wonderful way to help people understand that there's such a huge spectrum there to grow into. To do that, I really admire anything that's got a tight model to it. So your 5 C's approach to developing soft skills is really, really accessible. And I want to also applaud you, Yadi, because your book is chock full of really, really practical, actionable ways to develop these skills. So really want to applaud you for creating a really meaty book here. So let's do this. Let's let our listeners and viewers get just kind of a high level sort of tour, if you will, of these 5 C's, because we're going to, in the next 2 segments, we'll dive more deeply into some of the more specific areas that were skills that you want people to develop. So the 5 C's are?
So the 5 C's are connect, then communicate, then collaborate and create, which are kind of grouped together, and then correct. And each one of these C's focuses on what are the skills within each C that we need to develop as a team, or as a manager, but as a team as well. So it provides a roadmap, because, for example, we cannot go in either as a manager or even as a new member of a team to go ahead and let's just start creating new things, creating products, without really connecting first. So we need to build that trust with the team, understand their pain points, or the pain points from the team, or the pain points from a customer perspective. So we need to connect first. Then we need to work a lot in the communication. Communication, of course, applies throughout, but I really place emphasis here, because communication is about listening, which is a critical aspect of working in a team. And we all are suck at it, as I say in the book, that we're not great listeners. But setting it also, aside from listening, establishing, communicating the vision. What are we working towards? So that's an aspect that once you connect, you communicate effectively, and once you have those elements, you start working in depth with the collaboration and creation skills, which could include everything from how to manage our productivity, how do we prioritize effectively. There's so many skills within that area, but that as a team or in an organization, we need to be in a constant state of collaboration and creation. But we also need to have the mindset that it's not just coming in and producing things, that we also need to cultivate the skills of the how do we collaborate and create. And then the last C being correct, which is a constant as well, but it's just like once we collaborated and created things, we need to take the time to step back and look at what is going well, what needs improvement, and also how do we create a culture of learning in the organization. How do we handle conflict even within a team? Like conflict could be a great thing for teams. So that's kind of like a roadmap that I've established based on my experience working with teams and realizing that all these elements need to be into place. And of course, it's a constant cycle because then we go back to continuing that connection, communication, collaboration, creation, correction. So it's kind of like a cycle, but it helped to serve as a framework to select which are the skills that we need to select to cultivate first as we enter into a team.
Nice. Yadi, very nice. Beautiful way to let our listening viewers go into our first break as they consider those 5 C's. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Yadira Caro. She's an organizational psychology practitioner who has been working with teams of developers and engineers with military organizations for over 15 years. We've been talking about the importance of soft skills and how they make a difference for managerial effectiveness. And also, she's now just introduced her 5 C's approach to developing soft skills. After the break, we're going to go into a tour and help serve up several different skill areas that you can learn to develop along the way. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, as I am dedicated to helping create a world where organizations thrive because their people thrive and they're led by inspirational leaders that help them find and to contribute their greatness. And we do business that betters the world. I keep researching and writing my own books. So one of my latest came out. It's called The Great Revitalization: How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I wrote it to help leaders understand what today's workforce really wants and needs to give their best and stick around. And I provide you 22 best practices to equip you to provide that for them through your leadership and your culture. You can find my books on Amazon or my personal site, elisecortez.com. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Yadira Caro. She's the author of Hardcore Soft Skills, A Guide to Work with Humans. So I really appreciated that you opened pretty handily after, just kind of introducing your concepts with a chapter on self-awareness. And one of the things, of course, that I know in my work, and you do too, is just how critical that is and the huge gap that usually exists in what we think we are aware of in ourselves and really what's so. So I really align with, the whole list of soft skills that you offer in the book as a basis to self-evaluate. But then you also go on to add a bit of a 360 component there where you have them compare their self-assessment with 2 other people to help illuminate their level of self-awareness, which is that, they might be stronger in some areas or vice versa than what their other people think. So I just, if you could comment and expand a bit on, that approach to self-evaluation that you work with.
Yeah, so when it came to that particular chapter, so it's the beginning in terms of the first thing that we need to do in order to understand how do we improve or focusing a lot on our strengths. So I created a list of different skills, and in terms of assessing of what would good look like in terms of that particular skill, and then kind of like allowing us to take a kind of a check in to see, oh, is this me or not me? Then the next part will be that we take that same assessment and we give it to another person, and they, without seeing the responses, the other person, either a trusted colleague, our spouses, or our friends, so they are able to fill it out as well, because I wanted to do that so we could compare and contrast and see, for examples, that perhaps we may think that we are terrible at either a delegation or at a time management. And perhaps others think that, oh no, you are great at this or communication or explaining complex concepts. So a lot of the times we think that we have either weaknesses or strengths, and others see that as things of great value for us, so for them as well. So it is important as a team to identify, to help open it up to the team to help identify what are the strengths from the others, because they could recognize things that we don't see in ourselves. And also, I wanted to ensure that this was a very accessible a self-assessment, because there are, of course, very sophisticated tools to be able to assess. But at least I wanted to give the people kind of like a head start of like, hey, let's do a self-assessment. It's not entirely scientific, but at least it helps us get a good understanding of what our strengths are.
Mm-hmm. I think it's excellent. And the list is really quite robust. Listeners and viewers, when you read her book, you're going to be surprised at the list of soft skills that she has in that assessment. And you start to realize there's a lot more to this area than you probably ever imagined. And to that end, one of the things that you talk about, you have a whole chapter entitled How to Navigate Office Politics, which of course is networking skills. And of course, you and I both know that a lot of people that are really more technical, they loathe anything that has to do with politics and sometimes even networking. So could you talk a little bit about the importance of building good relationships with your colleagues up, down, and all around? And just maybe ways that listeners and viewers can start to build their networking skills and prowess. You have a whole bunch of ways that you list in the book, but we'll just maybe give them a couple of different ideas.
Yeah, so building relationships, because I know office politics sounds so, it may not have a necessary good connotation, and people could say, like, no, I'm not that type of person who I want to engage in office politics. In one way or another, we really all have to be engaged in those quote unquote politics, because we need to be able to collaborate with others in order to get things done. So it's not just about meeting the people in your team, it's realizing that the thing I am working with in my team also depends on others. Others depend on my success, and I depend on others for my success. So even in working in organizations, I think you could sit next to a cubicle to another person, and I find a lot of the times that you see that person every day, you don't even know what they do or what their interests are, and then realize like, oh, this was the person that I need to be speaking to all along. So I think it's very important to find ways to meet other people in the office, either it being like, for example, just creating a space that's just like offering to share your knowledge in launch and learn sessions, or attending launch and learn sessions for others. Also, just do like I kind of took the deliberate effort, or even if we're working remote, of like the follow-up Fridays, which is to go ahead and reaching out to new people that perhaps maybe in your same area, but you haven't reached out to, and say like, hey, I work in this particular team, and I see that you're also working with this project. Want to get to know a little bit about your practices, and you will be surprised at how people react to that, because people really do want to connect. So those are some easy ways to understand that it's not about just going, spending your day socializing, the perception that we have. It's all about making sure that we really have to build connections. So when we start a project, doing like a kickoff between all the team members, that we really get to know each other. So simple ways that we all need to be able to move beyond and break those silos that are in organizations that a lot of the times depends on us.
I will add to that, Yadi, and that was such a beautiful rendition, and I see it too in all over the years that I work with organizations, and of course, oftentimes that's going to entail working with individual coaching, et cetera, as well for the team members. Is the team members that really build strong careers have those strong relationships. These are people that are speaking on their behalf when they're not in the room because they've developed those relationships. They have access to them to ask them critical questions on how to be able to elevate their career and work through problems because they've made those relationships. And it's just a much smoother way to go. It's work and it takes talent to do it, but boy, is it worth it to develop, these networking, social, relational skills.
Yeah, and it is, and particularly now because we know for people that are looking for work and or people that have found work, a lot of the testimonials that we hear is that it wasn't through just normally applying resume or being picked for a job for people you don't know. It's based on those relationships that you build throughout your career, and those are could be very healthy, satisfying relationships for because you get to learn from them, exchange information. So it is very important to just take the time, like one day a week, like I suggest, or other times maybe using LinkedIn as well is a great way to get to know others on your field and really take the time to develop relationships, meaning that you collaborate knowledge, you exchange ideas, and it's such a fun way to do that because it's not about giving a card or giving your elevator speech. It's about really sharing knowledge that are some of the great ways to build those relationships.
Absolutely. Love that. I'm going to move us on to the idea of, you have a chapter on how to get along, which is really about building a team contract. And I think this is such a powerful concept that so many teams are not implementing. And I learned it really, Yadi, the first time when I was teaching at the University of Phoenix and then later at the Southern Methodist University as an adjunct. They had us do team contracts. So, and this is so important, especially when you have a team that, has virtual people on it, hybrid people on it. It's critical. So if you could speak a little bit to this idea of team contract.
Yes, and team contract, even though it may sound so official, it's not referring to like a human resources standard procedure. It's just basically that, like an agreement between the team members to define how are we going to communicate, which meetings are we going to have, or how are we going to prioritize. What are the roles? That's one of the things that it's a lot of the teams that have been working for years. You see that a lot of the conflict it stems from no clarity on the roles or no clarity on the outcomes. Like, what is it what we're working towards? What is it? When do we know that we are done with something? Like setting those expectations since the beginning and having just a kind of a living document of you get together, some person can start it, a manager could start it, but it's very important that it's developed with the input from the team. So they, at the end, they all agree and they realize like, hey, we're going to look at it together and in the near future, assess, reassess, but at least you set those expectations since the beginning, like prioritizing. Another factor is if conflict occurs, how are we going to manage that? So, for example, making sure that if there's conflict, we're going to dedicate a space to it. So there could be many things added to that team contract, but I guarantee that it's, even if you've been working with a team for a long time, it's a practice that I suggest everybody to do because it will save so much headache later on.
Mm-hmm. I really agree with that. And that's where, being able to indicate, what are you really, prioritizing or evaluating their performance on? Is it that they're present, that you can, contact them at any moment during the day, they're findable, or is it what they actually put out at the end of the day or the end of the week that you're really focused on? That kind of stuff, delineating that can save a whole lot of headache. You feeling frustrated as the manager, you getting fired as the team member for not meeting expectations. So I think this team charter thing is gold.
Yes, and it doesn't have to be perfect. So if we remove the expectation that we have to have the perfect team contract and we spend so much time drafting it, we shouldn't do that. We should just say like, okay, this is an initial version, and
Yep.
based on the lessons that we learn, we'll modify along the way. Embracing it that way will take away a lot of the pressure because it's having it will save time and effort, and also it's part of the continuous improvement of the team. As the team evolves, then new challenges will come in and new things will need to be added to that team contract.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Beautiful. So we have to talk about your chapter that you have. It's called How to Keep Yourself and Others Engaged. This is motivation skills that you're addressing here. And now this at a time, listeners and viewers, if you don't understand these numbers, they're really, kind of overwhelming. The global employee engagement rate is 21%. So that what that means, listeners and viewers, if you have 10 people on your team, that means that 2 of them are charging forward to produce results for you, and 8 of them are either holding steady or pulling you back. I don't know how you produce results with that. In the United States, it's 31%. So, a little better here. So learning how to become a more effective manager that knows how to motivate your team is pretty darn critical today. So share with us a little bit about some ways that they can work on elevating engagement.
Yeah, so even motivation, of course, having a good paycheck motivates teams, or having perks. Those are key motivating factors, of course. But what really drive teams, that intrinsic motivation, are some key factors that I've got from the book of and the work of Daniel Pink in regards of the elements of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy, meaning that the team want to be able to work, or individuals want to be able to work on the things they want to work on. So being conscious as a manager that we want to provide to the teams not the exact pathway, but just at least give them the ability to be autonomous in either at specific projects or specific initiatives or steps. Keeping that in mind, the purpose is it's key, because even particularly the example of military organizations that they're deployed, they are working really, tough jobs. But when they have in mind that this is to meet a particular mission, I need to meet the mission, they have that very clear. And the same principle can be applied to any team, which, as long as you know that there's a purpose that is just aside from get the thing complete, it's more about how is this going to benefit the end user, how is this going to benefit the organization. Having that and communicating that to the team regularly is very it's critical to build that motivation. So purpose, autonomy, and then mastery. And that's the part where we initially, when we talked about the assessing our strengths, when we focus on our strengths and not our weaknesses, but just focusing on the things that we're good at, that really motivates us, because we are able to demonstrate our knowledge. So by us understanding what are the strengths of the team, then we can place them in different roles that are specific and aligned to their specific strength. So those 3 key factors are to be considered in order to be able to motivate our teams to do the work and get them more engaged and improve those metrics that you were referring to.
Staggering metrics that I referred to. Yes. Awesome. Okay. Well, with that, now that we've talked a little bit about the aspect of engagement and motivation, let's motivate our listeners and viewers with a break. And that's our last one. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Yadira Caro. She's an organizational psychology practitioner who has been working with teams of developers and engineers with military organizations for over 15 years. We've been getting into some of the specific skills that she teaches and talks about in her book. After the break, we will continue on and talk about the importance of stopping micromanaging. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. As you know by now, this program is dedicated to empowering and inspiring you along your journey to realize more of your potential. If you want to learn more about how we can work together and learn about the Gusto Now Academy for leaders and individuals on various journeys alike, make your way to gusto-now.com and then head and navigate to the training tab. You'll find the Academy there. Love to have you join us. If you are just coming into the program, my guest is Yadira Caro. She's the author of Hardcore Soft Skills, a guide to work with humans. So this next bit here on micromanagement is just so important to talk about because I know this from my own experience training and developing supervisors, managers, and leaders, how hard it can be sometimes to let go. And you, especially when you're earlier in your career, it's very hard to let go and let other people do work in their own way. And so, but this notion of learning how to stop micromanaging and develop good, strong dedication skills is really, really important. And I know you mentioned that this was hard for you too, as it is
Yes.
for all of us as we go through this process.
Yes, it was because I'm a person who had trouble delegating, and it was particularly if, for example, starting in positions that it was just me, and then kind of growing a team. That becomes very difficult to be able to kind of let go and trust the team to do the way things with the even better outcomes, but in different processes as well. So it's something that I've struggled with, and this is the part that one of the things that I really wanted to focus in the book, because I've also been working alongside people that could be macro managers and seeing the impact that it can have in a workplace culture. It creates a really toxic work environment because people just kind of like throw their hands off and just say like, you know what, I'm just tell me exactly what to do, and I'll do the thing without, and they feel demoralized to kind of be able to work successfully.
And resentful too, as well. And now we go back, let's tie back to what we were talking about just before the break. One of the ways to motivate the team is through autonomy. So autonomy also can be used when we give our team members, we say, this is the end result that I need you to produce by this time. And here's what good looks like, by the way. And then you give them the autonomy to do it their way, discover new ways to do it. Sometimes you need to check in to make sure they're okay and they don't need more support or more materials or whatever. But oftentimes you just might be delighted with what they produce, that you never could have come up with that, and they came up with something much better. And that's when it's delightful to be able to learn how to delegate.
Yes, indeed. And going back to this is why in the 5 C's framework, so connecting first, so you get to know your team and their strengths, then communicating, meaning that part of where you really communicated as a manager, what is the outcome? What is the big picture that you want to achieve with the work of the team? And then that's when the part of handing to the team, okay, collaboration and creation. So giving them the roadmap of, hey, here's what we need to develop, and really trusting the team based on their strengths of how they're gonna do the thing. But also, we don't need to be inserted along the way in every step of the way, like actions that we may be committing right now, which are like, I need to be included in every email, or I need to be participating in every single meeting, or hey, if I'm on vacation, hold everything, don't work on anything because I'm going on vacation, and then once when I return, we'll work on the thing again. Those are basically things that we set the team for failure because we're limiting their ability, and as you say, that they could create so much better results. So we need to be conscious of the things that we do and give the team the power to be able to produce something great, and we all can learn along the way.
I love that 100%. And then you have a chapter or an area on how to criticize without making or taking it personal. So this is about feedback skills. And boy, this is such a powerful skill to learn. You do how to do this well, that you can literally help give corrective or constructive feedback to somebody in a way that they so appreciate it, instead of, feeling demoralized by or small by, or you need to take a posture of defense. So talk to us a bit. You've got this, the 5 C's of providing feedback, but can you talk to us first about, the criticality of the feedback? How can we not take it personally, and how can we give it well?
Yeah, so feedback is very hard skill to master, giving and receiving feedback too, because a lot of times when people give us feedback, either we may not recognize it or just say, hey, thank you, and really recognize that we did something good, or we get very defensive and kind of want to feel that we're taking it personal. So I think part of the things we need to recognize is that when giving feedback, for example, as a manager, it's very tough because we need to focus on the specific process or activity and not give the feedback directly, like you as a person, here's how you are, or here is you're a bad communicator, or you are terrible at time management, or things that really could be personal. So it's not our place or in anybody's place in a work environment to provide feedback in that way. we need to focus on this, be very specific about things that didn't work out. Like, for example, if you consider that that person needs to be able to provide better demonstrations, you say, hey, I noticed this on the demonstration. Here's a suggestion. You ask if you can provide the suggestion. And once the person is recipient to that, you say, like, here's what it didn't achieve, or here's what I thought could be improved on that particular presentation, but always really focusing on the process or the specific activity. And it's very important to be direct, because a lot of the times we think that the sandwich approach of like first compliment, then that thing, and then close it with a compliment. Sometimes we can see through the surface and you say like, hey, just be direct with me. And
Yeah.
it's more effective that way. As long as we focus on the process part. And also, if we're a recipient of feedback, we also need to recognize that there are instances that people could be very insulting. So we need to make sure that if it gets personal, that they attack our character, then we need to put a stop to those situations. So again, focusing a lot on the process part and being very specific about what we're giving feedback on.
I liked, your 5 C's. Anytime you have the ability to create something like that, in my the Great Revitalization, I organized the whole book around the acronym of Gusto Now, which of course is my company name, but it's more memorable. So I really like though that you offer when we're giving good feedback that we consider the context, the actual content of the message. What do we actually want to see changed? We do it with compassion, and then we have a close that somehow communicates that we care about this person or invested in them or something. And I think that helps people because this is hard. It's hard to learn how to give constructive, caring feedback.
Yes, and having those elements in mind, and also one key advice for managers too is that as we consider giving feedback, we also need to be willing to receive feedback as well and ask from not people at above our level or others in it that are our peers. It's important to say like, hey, I've given you feedback. Being open to say like, hey, if you have specific feedback for me, or what things do you think I could help you better at or I could improve at. It's also very important to have that humility to be able to accept feedback from our team members too.
100%. Yeah. In fact, I've had people on my podcast. Jeff Wetzler talks a lot about the importance of creating a relationship in which you make it safe for people to give you feedback. And so how much that accelerates your own development when you can create a relationship and a space for people willing to be able to say, hey, boss, I think you messed up back there. Here's what I saw. Without, most of the time you were never going to hear that feedback. And by the way, the more you grow in your career, the less you're going to hear that feedback from your team members because you get really scary the higher you go up. So you cut off really valuable input when you don't receive that feedback.
Yeah, and one key to that I've tried is when it comes to working with teams, and either as a facilitator would be to request feedback from the team members, not necessarily like do we need a meeting, but say, if you were a manager, what would you do differently? So that's a way to kind of not attack the manager personally. It's a way to say like, oh, these are some key things that, hey, if there were managers that will do. And that's kind of indirect direct feedback for the manager, but it's a way that the team feels a little bit more safe to provide the things that they wish they could see change without necessarily feeling that they have to get one-on-one with you to give advice.
Excellent. Okay, so I can't let you get off the podcast without talking about this. You have a chapter that says how to deal with constant change, which is, of course, adaptability skills. In today's environment in 2026 and after last year and all the crazy, AI introductions, automation, tariffs, wars, everything else, craziness. So, being able to deal with constant change, you learn this skill, boy, you're going to start your health increases incredibly, and so do your results. So let's talk about a few ways to help our listeners and viewers handle constant change.
Yes, and it's so hard because dealing with change sucks a lot of times, and particularly if our organizations are downsizing, if we see peers that are leaving the organization unwillingly, or roles changing, so it's very difficult. So it sounds very kind of to positive optimism here, but I think it's very important to keep a mindset of like, okay, what, let's focus on the things I can control. There's all the things we have like a kind of like a circle to identify those things that change is happening. I cannot stop, layoffs. I cannot stop role shifting. So here's the things that I can control, and really make a list of those things, meaning like the skills that you have. You can develop new skills. You can identify people that are happy in the roles or that have like the change that you're about to set into. Like, let's say they change your role. You can identify another person who's in that same role that they just love what they do, and talk to that person and see what is so good about that particular role. So it's keeping that mindset of, hey, in this new role, perhaps I could develop new skills. I will have a learning curve, but it allows me to have better skills for the thing that I want to get on later on in the near future. So just focusing on the things that we can control is a very powerful action, because we just have to realize that change is going to happen. Our roles are not going to be the same in 5 years, and let's just be willing to grow and identify opportunities where the change could be good.
Mm. I love that. I love also how crisp you are in your answers. We're getting so much out of you. Let's kind of close the show here with just, if you can share just briefly, something of a case study of an organization that you worked with that to help them develop these hardcore soft skills. So help us understand, what were they dealing with? What was the problem? Why would they want to bring you in? And how did your intervention help them?
Yeah, so I'll provide an example which was specifically not targeted to, hey, we want to teach these people how to learn soft skills, but it was when I was tasked to work with the leadership to create a transformation efforts in the organizations, like become more agile and help a whole IT organization improve the way they were working, become more agile, adapt to change. So it wasn't specifically on, hey, let's make sure that everybody's better at soft skills. What I did was a kind of this help environment helped me test my framework, because it was in a military organization, which was realizing that that the first thing that I needed to do was connect with all the folks that were like dozens of folks in the organization, and help them connect with each other, because they were working together, quote unquote, but a lot of the times it was just very team based. So I took a deliberate effort to make sure that everybody get to really meet each other, or even they work together, but they were in different buildings, but they never met face to face. So just that mini action of getting people to know, like, hey, let me take you to the office of this person, let's meet each other, that kind of help put the walls down of, hey, we can really collaborate and have those conversations around the things that we need to resolve. So connecting first, then going into the communication factor of, like, let's really understand the mission, let's make sure the mission is clear, working with the managers to make sure, like, hey, we need to ensure that we're giving clarity on what the mission is, what we need to do, and really work together. The collaboration and creation factor came along with working with these multiple teams, and first setting the team contract, the team agreement, that with each team that I was working with in this transformation effort, making sure that, hey, let's set a team agreement on how we're going to collaborate. What is the definition of done with that particular team? And it was a lot of based on agile practices. So how we're going to work together, what is good look like, and here's how we're going to reflect the work, make the work transparent to others. Here's how we're going to get and receive feedback from others as we demonstrate our products. So establishing the cadence of how each team was going to work was critical, because a lot of the times it depended on the priority of the day. So giving the teams, helping them set up their structure was critical. And then the last part of correcting, so setting a culture where they could stop what they were doing, reflect back on what's going well and what needs improvement, and making sure that that was a process that was established, that they will kind of reflect back on the things that they were doing. That action to identify, hey, we need to do work better with these other sectors. So let's establish a plan that by next week we really need to connect with these other people in order to be able to get things sorted, or we need to document this process. So keeping that cycle, it was very effective to help create a spirit of transformation in the organization, and it was basically teaching them those critical skills, helping them work with these critical skills without necessarily saying, hey, we're going to work on these soft skills right now. The outcome was the transformation of the organization, and that was a very successful example of the use of the 5 C's.
What a powerful way to finish the show and help our listeners and viewers really understand your work a little bit better. Thank you so much, Yadira, for coming on to Working on Purpose. I loved reading your book. It's chock full of really amazing, practical, useful information. And now you're stuck with me. We're staying connected. Okay, you can run, but you can't hide. Listeners and viewers, if you want to learn more about Yadira Caro and the work she does with software developers, engineers, and managers in the defense sector, creating solutions to optimize how work is done and how knowledge is shared, or if you want to learn more about her book, Hardcore Soft Skills, one place you can go to is her website, hardcoresoftskillspodcast.com. You can also find her on LinkedIn. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch a via recorded podcast. We were on air with Dr. Paul White talking about the book he co-wrote with Gary Chapman, The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace, Empowering Organizations by Encouraging People. We talked about the ROI of appreciation in the workplace, how it differs from recognition, and examples of the 5 languages of appreciation. Next week, we'll be on air with Doug Brackman talking about the I Am Driven assessment he developed from a fascination with the research in the components of powerful thought and action, which he sees in the very successful practice of highly driven leaders. See you then. Let's continue to lean in, discovering how to elevate your operating system as a leader, become inspirational, and create destination workplaces where legendary business takes place. Let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.